there's something quietly fascinating about the way certain women surrender to those who hurt them, as if an invisible force, older than reason itself, leads them into the same abyss, the gaze of the man who promises intensity but delivers chaos. This is the psychology of women who fall for scoundrels, a theme that belongs not only to the realm of love, but to the deepest territory of the human soul. Carl Jung would call it a dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious, a call from the shadows, an echo demanding recognition. Behind this magnetism lies a plot that transcends the surface of choices. When a woman approaches an emotionally destructive man, she rarely seeks suffering intentionally. What she seeks is the vibrant life he symbolizes. The scoundrel carries something that society has taught her to deny: wild freedom, audacity, instinct, fearless desire. He embodies the forbidden part of herself, the part that dares to live without asking permission. And without realizing it, she tries to touch him to touch this forgotten part of herself. Many would say it's naivete. I say it's instinct in conflict with conscience. Love in this case is not blind, it's symbolic. The scoundrel becomes a mirror. He reflects what she needs to confront but doesn't yet recognize. That's why the fascination is so intense. He activates the unconscious, stirs up wounds, brings forth what has been repressed. This dark and seductive energy doesn't come from him, it comes from her. He merely awakens what lay dormant beneath layers of morality and fear. Jung said that everything we deny within ourselves returns disguised as destiny. Thus, many women find themselves repeating the same type of relationship, believing they are loving different men when in reality they are reliving the same symbol. Each of these men represents an unconscious attempt to integrate what has been rejected: the contained anger, the desire for power, the impulse to assert oneself in the world. Until this inner reconciliation happens, love will continue to serve as a battleground between what she shows and what she hides. There is a bittersweetness in this quest. The woman believes she can transform him, heal the wounded man, civilize the savage, make him feel the love he himself destroys. But what she truly wants to heal is herself. She desires to prove she is worthy of being chosen, of being loved despite everything. This attempt at salvation is a disguise for her own emptiness. And when the scoundrel abandons or devalues her, what hurts is not the loss of him, but the collapse of the illusion of control. She realizes she cannot fix the other, because the other is merely a mirror of what is still broken within her. There is, however, something profoundly human in this process. Loving what is wrong is often the first step towards recognizing what is right. Error reveals the limit. Suffering, if understood, becomes the gateway to self-knowledge. What Jung called individuation begins precisely at this point, when love ceases to be a refuge and becomes a mirror. When desire ceases to be an escape and becomes revelation. When she begins to ask, why am I attracted to what destroys me? Why do I confuse intensity with love? Why does my soul recognize chaos as home? These questions don't seek quick answers, but awareness. Because awareness is the beginning of liberation. When a woman looks at the scoundrel and realizes that his charm is the symbolic language of something internal, the spell is broken. What was once magnetism becomes understanding. What was once pain transforms into wisdom. And it is at that moment that the soul begins to awaken. Nothing changes overnight. Awakening is slow, like the sunrise. The woman begins to see that true love doesn't tear her apart. True love expands her. That the right man isn't the one who challenges her to prove her worth, but the one before whom she doesn't need to hide who she is. She understands little by little that loving isn't about losing herself in the other, but about finding herself through the other. And when this awareness settles in, the type of man she attracts changes, because she has changed. But before reaching that point, we must descend into the depths of emotions, understand the fascination with the obscure. For it is there, in the heart of the shadow, that the secret of desire lies hidden. And it is precisely this secret that we will begin to reveal next. There's a moment when everything seems perfect. He looks, smiles, and the whole world shrinks to make room for that presence. There's a confidence in his gaze, a charm that mixes danger and promise. It's in that brief interval, between what is felt and what is understood, that fascination begins to weave its web. The man who carries the shadow seems to know secrets that no one else dares to touch. He speaks intensely, touches with mastery, and disappears when you begin to believe you know him. But the truth is, he was never really there. What existed was the reflection of your own neediness, projected onto a body that seemed capable of filling it. The psychology of these men is not limited to coldness or selfishness. They are mirrors of the collective unconscious, manifestations of an ancient archetype, the rebellious seducer, the free spirit, the emotional wanderer. Jung would say that the rogue is a symbolic figure, a messenger of the instinctive side that the rational mind has tried to tame. He represents the fire that burns away control, the impulse that disrupts the predictable. And that is why so many women feel something visceral in his presence, an awakening that feels like life after years of sleep. Imagine a woman who, after a secure but lukewarm relationship, meets a man who makes her laugh, cry, and doubt everything all at once. He doesn't promise stability, but he provokes something more dangerous. He makes her feel alive. He says he desires her, but never reveals how much. He's always one step ahead, always unreachable. This distance creates the magnetic field that keeps the relationship alive, and that's exactly what holds her captive. She confuses intensity with love, challenge with depth. The further he distances himself, the more she desires him. The more he hurts her, the more she believes she must prove her worth. Her unconscious recognizes the game and calls it destiny. In everyday life, this manifests itself in subtle ways. She compulsively checks her phone, tries to decipher messages, revisits conversations in search of signs. He appears and disappears like an eclipse, leaving traces of doubt and hope. When he is present, the world lights up. When he is gone, everything returns to darkness. This alternation of pleasure and absence creates a kind of emotional addiction, similar to the effect of a drug. The brain gets used to the peak and the fall, to the cycle of waiting and reward, and the confused heart calls this passion. Behind this dynamic lies an even deeper psychic plot. The scoundrel activates in the woman the energy of the inner masculine shadow, the animus, which desires to manifest itself. He challenges her to integrate her own strength, to appropriate the power she has long delegated to men. When she says, "I can't resist him," what she really means is, "I haven't yet been able to embrace this part of myself that he represents." This is the blind spot of consciousness. The desire is not for him, but for the freedom to be what he symbolizes. The relationship with the scoundrel is the stage where the unconscious rehearses its silent revolution. While she idealizes him, he confronts her with her limitations. While she waits for him, he teaches her about absence. While she tries to control him, she discovers that true mastery lies not in possessing the other, but in knowing herself. And every tear shed, every dawn of doubt, every time she says, "never again," and returns, all of this is part of the learning that life offers disguised as passion. The mystery is that, at some point, the woman realizes the enchantment is beginning to weaken. The same gaze that once hypnotized her now reveals an emptiness. The charm seems rehearsed, the speech repetitive. It's as if she wakes from a dream and sees the scene crumbling before her eyes. It is at this moment that fascination gives way to lucidity. She understands that the power was never in him, but in what she believed it to be. The enchantment dissolves, and behind it, a revelation appears. The scoundrel is not an enemy. He is a symbol, a disguised master who pushes her toward her own soul. But it's not the end yet. The discovery doesn't come without pain. When she tries to distance herself, the cycle seems to call her back, as if something still needs to be learned. And indeed it does, because the real break isn't with him, but with the version of herself that believed she needed a man like that to feel alive. And it is this internal, silent, and profound battle that will unfold next, the beginning of the fall of the illusion and the birth of awareness. There is an inevitable, almost sacred moment when a woman realizes that what binds her to this man is not him, but herself. It is when passion begins to show its true face, no longer as a warming fire, but as a revealing mirror. She begins to feel that there is something familiar in that pain, as if she had already lived it before, in another story, in another face, in another time. And perhaps she has. Because the unconscious does not measure time, it repeats until it is learned. Love then ceases to be an encounter and becomes a lesson. What she truly seeks in this type of man is something she lost long before meeting him: contact with her own soul. He awakens forgotten sensations in her, diffuse memories of strength and vulnerability coexisting. He is the trigger, but not the content. He activates an internal code that says, there is something unresolved here. That's why her body trembles, her heart races, her reasoning dissolves. The unconscious speaks through fascination, and fascination is always a form of language for that which has not been understood by consciousness. But what exactly does she see in him that attracts her so much? Perhaps the courage to be raw, the audacity to not apologize for existing. Perhaps the freedom to break rules she herself created to protect herself. He represents the opposite of what she has become to fit into the world. While she lived trying to be good, he survived by being real, and somehow that fascinates her. Not because she admires him, but because she envies the freedom he embodies. Could it be that, deep down, what she desires is this freedom, and not the man who carries it? This is the silent turning point that many don't perceive. The desire for the other is, in fact, the desire for oneself. The scoundrel is the disguise the unconscious uses to present to the woman the part of herself that sleeps. He is the messenger of what needs to awaken, and the price of this awakening is high. It demands recognizing one's own complicity with the pain. It is no longer possible to blame only the other. Each tear, each disappointment, each reunion is a summons to consciousness. Suffering ceases to be an accident and becomes a path. At some point, the woman begins to understand the secret script behind the story. She realizes it's not bad luck nor destiny. It's psychology. It's the unconscious in motion. The same phrases, the same gestures, the same silences. Everything returns with different faces, but with the same meaning. She asks herself, why do I always choose the same type of love? Why am I attracted to those who don't stay? Why do I confuse intensity with reciprocity? These questions are not punishments. They are invitations. They open doors within the mind, and behind each one lies an old memory, an inherited belief, an unhealed wound. Some women will realize that the pattern began in childhood, in absences, conditional affections, broken promises. Others will see that it stemmed from their own attempt to control vulnerability, to never depend again. The scoundrel enters the scene as the perfect actor to relive the plot, and she, without realizing it, accepts the leading role. Only when the script becomes predictable does awareness begin to form, and at that point, the soul begins to yearn for a new ending. Then the question that changes everything arises. What if true love has nothing to do with pain? What if the intensity she seeks is in fact the echo of the lack she still carries? This doubt is liberating. It breaks the spell. Because when love ceases to be synonymous with suffering, the allure of the destructive loses its meaning. The fascination transforms into clarity. What was once a flame becomes light. And, for the first time, the woman sees the man before her, not as a promise, but as a symbol. And by recognizing him as a symbol, she liberates him. She liberates him and herself. Still, awareness brings a kind of loneliness. When one understands that the other was merely a mirror, one misses the illusion. Emptiness appears, no longer as punishment, but as a new space. It is uncomfortable, but it is true. And it is in this emptiness that something sacred happens, the reunion with oneself. What was once a search for a man becomes a search for meaning. What was once pain becomes a path. And what once seemed like an end reveals itself as a beginning. But this journey back to herself is not yet over. Because even after recognizing the pattern, the woman needs to learn how to break the cycle. Understanding is the first step, transformation is the second, and it is precisely there, between knowing and acting, that the mind tries to resist. It is on this border, between awakening and falling, that the unconscious still tests its strength, and it is on this threshold that the next crossing will begin. There comes a point when love is no longer love, but attachment disguised as hope. It's when the woman knows he won't return, but still waits for a message that will never come, an apology that will never be uttered, a minimal gesture that justifies everything that was felt. This waiting is the cruelest echo of emotional addiction. The mind knows it's over, but the body doesn't obey. And it is in this discrepancy between reason and emotion that the invisible power of the cycle is revealed. The need to repeat the suffering until understanding what it teaches. Studies in neuropsychology show that the human brain does not differentiate between emotional dependence and drug addiction. The same areas that are activated in chemical addiction are triggered when there is an intermittent relationship of affection and rejection. Each time the affection returns, the body releases dopamine. Each time it disappears, the brain enters withdrawal. This oscillation creates a biological prison, sustained by emotional memories that are confused with love. The woman believes she is in love, but what she feels is emotional withdrawal. Love at this point is a disguise for neediness. A patient once told me, "He hurts me, but when he's away, I even miss the pain." This phrase encapsulates the labyrinth. Suffering, when familiar, becomes home. What is predictable, even if destructive, brings a false sense of security. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat, the unconscious impulse to relive the original trauma in an attempt to control it. It is a desperate attempt by the psyche to transform pain into meaning. But meaning only arises when there is awareness. Until then, the woman dances with the abyss, believing it is love. There is something tragic and beautiful in this human insistence on seeking healing from the same hands that wound. The heart tries to resolve with passion what the soul has not resolved with introspection. It believes that if it is good enough, faithful enough, patient enough, it will change. But the change the unconscious seeks is not its own, it is hers. It is the mirror that reflects back the question she avoids. What in me still accepts so little? This question is the beginning of the breaking of the spell. When it arises, the enchantment begins to crumble. From this point on, the stories change tone. Love ceases to be a romantic climax and becomes a mirror of healing. Suffering takes on the contours of revelation. The woman begins to realize that it wasn't bad luck, nor misfortune, nor destiny. It was a calling. Life placed that man in her path so that she would look inward and find the origin of the wound. And when she begins to see this, the cycle loses its power. The addiction weakens because pleasure no longer masks the pain, it reveals it. Once, a woman who was involved in this process told me something I'll never forget. I realized I didn't love him. I loved the feeling of being chosen. This phrase reveals the hidden truth behind many stories. Love for a scoundrel is, in essence, a search for validation. The woman who hasn't learned to choose herself looks to the other for proof that she is worthy of love. But this proof is always fleeting, because it depends on the other's desire. When the other looks away, she loses her footing. Only then does she realize it was never love, it was survival. What follows is a period of emptiness and silence. She feels something die within her, and it truly does. It's the end of the illusion of control. The ego loses its support. It's painful, but necessary, because every liberation begins with a loss. It is at this point that the woman begins to rebuild herself, not as the victim of the story, but as its author. She realizes that the power she surrendered was hers from the beginning, that true love is not asked for, not begged for, not conquered. It happens when there is inner presence. Interestingly, when this awareness takes hold, the outside world reacts. The same type of man who once seemed irresistible begins to lose his luster. The energy shifts. The gaze changes. The body no longer vibrates with drama, but with peace. It's as if the soul has finally learned the difference between intensity and depth. Chaos ceases to be attractive. The woman now recognizes the pattern and chooses not to participate in it anymore. And this silent act, that of not repeating, is the most revolutionary moment of the journey. But the unconscious is cunning, and before true liberation, it will still test your decision. The past may return disguised, the same pattern may emerge with a new appearance, and it is in this moment of trial that the future is defined. Because healing is not linear, it is spiral, and each turn that life takes is an opportunity to choose differently. It is at this crossroads between what was and what can be that the true metamorphosis begins. The birth of a conscious woman, capable of loving without self-annihilation. There comes a moment when the woman realizes there is no turning back. The enchantment breaks, but the mind still struggles to comprehend the emptiness that remains. It's as if the ground opens up, and for the first time, she sees what lies beneath everything, the naked truth of her own loneliness. This moment is terrifying. The body feels the weight of absence. The heart tries to cling to memories, and the soul, silent, observes. It is the beginning of healing, although it still seems like the end. The chaos that once came from outside now reveals itself within her, and this is the turning point that transforms pain into awakening. She wonders if she truly loved him, or if she only loved the role of being the caregiver, the one who waits, the one who believes she can fix the other. And little by little, the answer takes shape. What she called love was, in fact, an attempt to rescue herself from an old wound. The scoundrel merely played the role that fate entrusted to him, that of provoking the final confrontation between who she is and who she pretended to be. It is in this discovery that the tension shifts. The enemy is no longer outside, but inside. And when the gaze turns inward, the silence that once hurt begins to become sacred. The mind tries to resist. It feels the need to understand why. It wants answers, explanations, a logical conclusion. But the psyche doesn't speak in logic, it speaks in symbols. What she experienced wasn't a tragedy, it was a rite of passage between unconsciousness and consciousness. The man who hurt her was merely the guardian of the portal. Without him, perhaps she would never have questioned what she accepted out of love. It's a bitter, but liberating revelation. The suffering had a purpose. And when this understanding settles in, something within her changes irreversibly. At this point, many try to go back. They seek the past as if searching for shelter, but the shelter no longer exists. Their gaze changes, their voice changes. Even the scent of the world seems different. What was once desire now sounds like noise. Life reorganizes itself around a new axis, quieter, deeper. It is in this silence that she begins to feel something she previously confused with fear. Peace. Not the romantic peace of stories, but a peace that comes from the exhaustion of fighting against the inevitable. The fight is over, and what remains is truth. There's a curious fact that always surprises. According to research on emotional recovery, the human brain begins to reconfigure itself after 90 days of breaking intense patterns. The synapses that previously associated pleasure with pain begin to disconnect, and new connections are formed. It's the body saying it's ready to be reborn. But rebirth doesn't happen in an instant. It happens in fragments. One day she wakes up and realizes she hasn't thought about him. Another day, she smiles for no reason. Little by little, the emptiness gives way to a new kind of presence, that of herself. I once heard a woman who went through this process say, "I had to lose everything I thought was love to understand what love is." That's the essence of the turning point. The pain that seemed like punishment reveals itself as initiation. She discovers that loving isn't about surrendering to the other. It's about recognizing herself whole in their presence. And even if they don't see her, she still remains whole. This understanding doesn't come from books or advice. It comes from the journey. And every journey has a moment when the sea seems to swallow you whole before parting. It is there that the ego dies and the soul is born. But fate still has one last trap, the reunion. Sometimes the same man returns, or someone very similar appears. He says the right words, promises what he previously denied. It's the final test. The woman, now aware, feels her heart race, not with love, but with recognition. She knows she has lived through that scene before, and this time she doesn't participate, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. What was once desire is now compassion. She sees it as part of a learning process, not as destiny. And in this simple act of not repeating, she closes the cycle. This is the true turning point. The moment when love ceases to be a pursuit and becomes a state of being. When a woman understands that love is not what she receives, but what she is. That the other person doesn't come to complete her, but to reveal what was already within. And when this awareness blossoms, the world around her changes. Her gaze gains serenity, her touch loses urgency, her presence becomes sufficient. It is the harbinger of rebirth, the preparation for the final chapter, where love ceases to be a wound and becomes awareness. The silence that follows chaos is unlike any other. It is not empty, it is full. The woman who has walked through the fire no longer fears the ashes. She understands now that love was not a battlefield, but a mirror. The man who hurt her was merely a reflection of the part of her that needed attention. When she looked at him consciously, the shadow dissolved. And where there was once pain, presence was born. The true victory was not getting him back, but rediscovering herself. The cycle ends not with revenge, but with lucidity. She begins to see love as something that starts within and expands outward. The other ceases to be the center, and she becomes the axis. Emotions continue to exist, but now they are waves that come and go, no longer storms that sweep her away. This emotional maturity is the point at which Jung said, the soul individuates, becomes whole. And it is in this wholeness that true love is born, the kind that doesn't depend on the other to exist. Conscious love is that which includes the shadow, embraces error, and recognizes beauty in imperfection. The woman who awakens to this state realizes that solitude no longer frightens her. She understands that being alone is not the absence of love, but a space for love to mature. She learns to choose calmly, to listen attentively, to say no without guilt. She no longer needs to prove her worth to anyone, because she has already chosen herself. The same gaze that once sought approval now seeks depth. The same heart that once begged for presence now offers stillness. This is how love, finally, transforms into awareness. But this awareness is not a destination. It's a way of walking. The world will still test its new boundaries. People will come. Stories will try to begin again. The past will whisper memories. The difference is that now she knows she doesn't need to accept every invitation. Love has ceased to be an impulse and has become a choice. And it is in this choice that freedom flourishes. She can love intensely and still keep her soul at peace. She can surrender without losing herself and withdraw without feeling guilty. This is the wisdom that is born from the illuminated shadow. The most beautiful thing is that, when a woman awakens, she lights a light in the collective unconscious. Others, observing her, realize that they too can. That they no longer need to be saved, they just need to see themselves. This transformation is silent, but powerful. It's the kind of revolution that doesn't need applause, only courage. Courage to look inward, admit what hurt, and start again with love. Courage to recognize that true love is what makes us whole, not what divides us. Courage to stop waiting and start being. Perhaps this is the most profound message of this entire journey. No one heals pain by running away from it. Healing comes when pain is faced head-on, when we stop fighting what we feel and begin to understand why we feel it. The woman who understands this becomes indomitable, not because she no longer feels, but because she has learned to feel without drowning. And that is what makes her powerful. The serenity she once sought in others now emanates from within. Now, life goes on. She no longer needs answers, only presence. What comes next is lighter, more authentic. She understands that the love that truly transforms is not the one that promises intensity, but the one that offers peace. And it is this peace that she begins to spread in the world, through the way she looks, speaks, touches, and walks. The woman who once fell in love with chaos now inspires serenity, and her story ceases to be about loss. It becomes about rebirth. And perhaps you, listening to me now, feel something similar. Perhaps you recognize parts of this journey in yourself. The pain, the fascination, the awakening. If this video spoke to your soul, if at any point you saw yourself in these words, share what you felt. It can be silently, it can be anonymously. Write in the comments what this reflection awakened in you, because your experience can be the lamp that guides another person in the dark. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and continue walking with me on these journeys of the mind and heart. Your story matters, and your awakening has already begun.